Okay, welcome everybody to our class on Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law. We are doing chapter 95 and we're up to number 13. Number 13. Okay, so to refresh our memories, because it's been 2 weeks, we did like the Omer last week. We said that if when you made your Erev Techumim, this Erev to allow you to go an extra 2,000 Amos from wherever you made your Shabbos residence. So this artificial Shabbos residence, if a city is swallowed within your new residence. So let's just use an example. You made your Erev Techumim 1,000 Amos from your home, and 500 Amos from there is a town, and it's 1,000 Amos wide. So the whole thing is in your new Shabbos residence because of your Erev that you made. So then the town is only considered 4 Amos. So we count the whole 1,000 as 4. However, that's only if the entire town is swallowed by your 2,000 Amos limit. If it's not, so let's say, again, the same example, you make your Erev Techumim, your new Shabbos residence, 1,000 Amos from your home, 500 Amos away is a town, but the town is 3,000 Amos long. Then you can still only go to the end of your 2,000 Amos, so only 1,500 into the town. So that's if it's away from your home. Now we're going to speak about the reverse. So number 13. Actually, any questions on that before we start reversing and making it a little more complicated?
Rabbi, you said if the town is swallowed, do you mean water? Water?
No, we mean swallowed by your 2,000 Amos limit. So,
oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
So the reverse of that is the case, number 13, V'chein hadin. Likewise, the same law applies. Now, what you did is you made your Shabbos residence through the Erev Techumim almost 2,000 Amos outside of your city. So you live in Phoenix, let's say, or wherever you happen to live, and you go 1,999 Amos outside of the city limits, and you set up your Erev Techumim, you make your Shabbos residence there. So you can keep going another 2,000 Amos. However, when you head home, as you made your Erev 1,199 Amos away from the city limits, once you get back to the city limits, you can only walk 1 more Amma, because you can't have your cake and eat it. If you've moved your Shabbos residence to somewhere else, your 2,000 Amos radius is your new residence, not your home. So therefore, afterwards, when you return to your city, you go back into the city limits. You can only go back 2,000 Amos from your new Shabbos residence, and however far that takes you into the city, that's how far it takes you. And if the 2,000 Amos runs out before you reach your home, then you can't even go back home. Right? So there needs to be some planning here. There's no point, if you want to travel somewhere on Shabbos afternoon, putting a Shabbos residence in a place that you're going to have to sleep in the street because you can't make it home. But if somebody did, that's how it works. If it was misunderstanding and it was he didn't intend to, and now, certain cities, you spend the night in the street, or certain areas of certain cities. It's a life-threatening situation. So maybe you can go further, because we know life-threatening situations overrule certain things. But presuming that's not an issue, then a person set their Erev Techumim up, the new artificial Shabbos residence. They go back into the city. Once they hit 2,000 Amos, that's it. And if that 2,000 Amos doesn't get them home, they can't go home. All right. Number 14. Now, we've mentioned till now how to make an Erev Techumim, what you need, the food you need, how it works once it's made. We didn't yet say when you can do one, right? Is it whenever you feel like, or so we're going to see. Number 14. Ein ma'arvim Erev Techumim ela devar mitzvah. You can only make this artificial Shabbos residence if it's to do a mitzvah. Now, the definition of mitzvah is going to be quite liberal here, as we'll see in a moment. But in other words, there has to be something gained, not just because you want to go on a nice stroll. Right? It has to be to achieve something. You're going, for example, this palo basara, you want to done with a minion. Or the hakbel pnei rabbi, you want to go meet your teacher of Torah. Or you have a friend who's coming from a certain direction, and you want to meet him and be able to escort him. You want to spend time with him. Or the seudas mitzvah, or for a mitzvah meal. So, for example, a Shabbos meal is a seudas mitzvah, a bris, pidyon ben, shava brachas. Any meal of a mitzvah. Or to take care of the needs of the community, or communal needs. So any of those reasons are examples, but there could potentially be more. In other words, it's not just that you felt like it. There's an actual something positive to be accomplished. Or another possibility. Person was on a trip and he wants to make it home. Right. So when we finish this chapter, possibly today, we're going to have a little session on what to do if a person, chas v'shalom, if God forbid they didn't quite make it home before Shabbos. What you can do and when and how. And it overlaps with a lot of these laws. That's why we'll discuss it now when we finish this chapter. But let's say a person, we'll give a more modern example. A person is traveling home, and unfortunately, it's getting late, and they realize when Shabbos begins, they're not going to be able to walk the rest of the way home. So they call their friend who lives halfway and say, Can you make an Erev Techumim on my behalf? And then that place becomes a Shabbos residence. Let's say it's 1,500 Amos further. He pulls over, looks his car up, and now he can go 1,500 Amos to his new residence, and his home is, let's say, another 1,500 Amos the other side. So, in other words, to make it home. That's another reason. Though that's not technically a mitzvah, but it's sleeping under the tree isn't fun. If it can be avoided, we try to. It's, sometimes the bus stop is a very comfortable place to sit while you're waiting for a bus. But Hashem should bless us that we never have to move in. That's all right. Number 15. Now, you can only set up this Erev Techumim, this artificial Shabbos residence, on a weekday. You can't set it up on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Now, we know for Shabbos or Yom Tov, you can't set it up for that Shabbos or Yom Tov itself, Because as we learned earlier, the status when Shabbos begins, then the Shmoshes, that time between sunset and nightfall, that's the status for the whole Shabbos. So wherever your Shabbos residence is at that moment when Shabbos begins, that's what it is for the entire Shabbos. You can't change it on Shabbos. So here, when we're saying that you can't make it on Shabbos or Yom Tov, we don't mean for that Shabbos or Yom Tov. We mean for the next day. So let's say, for an example, Yom Tov is a Friday. So you can't make the Erev Techumim on Yom Tov for the Shabbos the next day even. Or the other way around. If Yom Tov is a Sunday, we're not going to be able to make it on Shabbos for the next day, which is Sunday. So, and im chal Yom Tov be'erev Shabbos, if Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbos on Friday, and you want to be able to go somewhere on Shabbos, you want to move your Shabbos residence so you can go somewhere extra on Shabbos. So then you have to set it up before Yom Tov. So even though normally you could do it on Friday, but if this Friday is Yom Tov, you can't do it. You have to set up the day before Yom Tov, either Thursday or Wednesday, depending. It's one day Yom Tov, 2 days Yom Tov, whatever it happens to be. And likewise, the other way around. The Yom Tov after Shabbos, if you got a Yom Tov after Shabbos, right? Sunday, like we're going to Shavuos this year. Shavuos is going to be Sunday, Monday, and you want to go somewhere outside the Tchum on Shavuos. So v'rayit tzalachas b'Yom Tov, and you want to go further on Yom Tov. Sarach lanechas erev be'erev Shabbos. You can't make the erev on Shabbos. You have to make it on Friday. Okay, and we'll skip the brackets. The brackets is just telling us where in the large Shulchan Aruch, if you wanted to be able to make your Shabbos residence by physically being somewhere. All right, that's a whole another topic that is not really this chapter. Okay, any questions on this so far? No? Okay. Now, our Shabbos residence doesn't only apply to ourselves, it applies to our belongings. So let's say, for an example, this cup, plastic cup, it's very precious, family heirloom, took it out of the plastic 5 minutes ago. But, we have this, this cup belongs to me. So it's in my house or not in my house. I left it in my courtyard. It's on top of my car, wherever it happens to be. Now, since it belongs to me, it can only go where I can go on Shabbos. So let's say, I left it, let's use an example. I left it on the top of my car. And we're not talking about if you live in a city, because then the 2,000 amos doesn't start to the edge of the city. I live in the country. And my front door is where my 2,000 amos start from. But my car is parked 20 feet away. And it's on top of the car. So this object's tchum does not begin where it is on Shabbos. It begins, it's 20 feet away where my tchum begins, because my possessions are considered an extension of me. Right? So therefore, let's say, back to my cup. Let's say it's not on my car, it's in my house. Keep it simple example. Got a cup in my house. And my friend who lives 1,000 amos away, so his Shabbos residence is 1,000 amas north from me. So from my house, he can go 3,000 amas north because he's got a 2,000 amma radius. He can go 1,000 amma one direction to my house. And then he can go back to his residence and keep going 2,000 the opposite direction because he's got 2,000 all the way around. That's him personally. But if he borrows my cup on Shabbos, if he borrows it before Shabbos, it's a different story, and that's what we're going to get to over here in a minute. But if he borrows it on Shabbos, so when Shabbos began, this object acquired my tichum, it acquired my 2,000 amas radius, and he walks 2,000 he walks 1,000 amas to my house, borrows my cup. When he goes back to his house, even though he personally can keep going 2,000 amas, he can only take my cup 1,000 amas. Now, if there's no Erev, he can't carry it all. But let's say it was Yontiv. He can't carry. Keep it simple. Right? Did that make sense to everybody? The concept, how a person's belongings acquire their...
Why carrying it can only do half the distance?
Because it acquired my tichum, so it can only go as far as I can go. So I can only go 2,000 amas from my house.
Okay.
Now this person who their Shabbos residence, their home was 1,000 amas away, he's got an extra 1,000 amas than I do, because he's got a 2,000 amma radius. So he walked 1,000 amas to my house, took my cup, went back to his house, and then he's got 2,000 amas the opposite direction that he can go. But my cup can't go all those 2,000 amas, can only go 1,000, because it can only go as far as I'm allowed to go.
I see.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So that's if he borrows it on Yontiv. In other words, it already acquired my tichum. Because as we say, the Shabbos residence of a person, and now we know also an object, not just a person, it's acquired when Shabbos begins. Okay, so number 16. Keilav of behemosav shel adam. A person's belongings, their objects, even their animals, Hare Hem Karaglov. They're like his feet. In other words, they're an extension of him. And any place that the owner cannot go, also their possessions can't go. Right? Even another person can't take them there. So even though the other person can go further than I can, but they can't take my possessions, even though they're allowed to go. So if we just give that example I gave before, person lives 1,000 amas from me, so he's got a 2,000 amma radius. So to come visit me, 1,000 amas away is within his tichum. When he goes back to his house, he can keep going 2,000 amas in the opposite direction. He's got a 2,000 amma radius. But I can't go 2,000 the other direction from his house. I can only go 1,000 because I'm using up one of my 1,000 getting to his house. And I can only keep going 1,000. He can go 2,000 from his house. I can go 1,000. So my possessions, which are an extension of me, can only go 1,000 past his house. So even though he's allowed to go 2,000, he can't take my belonging further than that 1,000. My possessions can only go where I can go. So therefore, the im hishilon the acha or skiron on the son the shmira. If yes, Susan.
But if there's a life-threatening situation with an animal, obviously it doesn't matter if it's a person or an animal. If its life is threatened, you're going to take care of it no matter what, correct?
Not necessarily. And the animal is going to depend. But a life-threatening situation of a person, then yes.
Okay.
Okay, because we're going to see.
Yeah, but you have goats or cows in the field. One of them breaks something, a hook, a leg or something. You have to, or maybe not. You know.
Not so let's say the animal wandered. We had this earlier. Wandered outside the 2,000 amos. So you can't go get it. Now, if you can attract it to come to you, something else. Now, if the animal
Can't walk, and it needs to be brought to a veterinarian or a hospital, and you can pick the animal up physically, but it's on Shabbos, you're not allowed.
So, well, picking it up is not the issue. It's the tchum now is the issue. No, in other words, two separate things.
Right.
So we have a mitzvah of tsar balachayim, which means you're not allowed to cause or let an animal suffer. Now, like anything in Judaism, sometimes you have a conflict of different concepts or different morals. So, like a simple example, normally you're not allowed to steal, right? But let's say there was a person who literally there's no food, and if they didn't steal something, they would die. Then, you know, maybe let's try and borrow or something. But I'm just saying, if there was really no other way, then they would be allowed to steal. You have a conflict of not stealing,
right, and
saving a life, even if it's your own life, right? So, you know, and sometimes it can be a mitzvah. Like, you know, I think I might have mentioned this once before. Example I give in high school often is I give a scenario, tell the students, there were two boys and one attracted someone's attention while the other one went to the back of his wagon and stole food. Then afterwards they ate it. Right or wrong? And they all say wrong, right? Can't do that, it's wrong. I said, okay, let's add in a few more details. It's the Warsaw Ghetto, and the Jews are being starved to death, God forbid. And one boy attracts a Nazi's attention, and another one sneaks up and steals the food. And now that food allows them to live. Right or wrong? So now it's right.
Right.
So often we have this
conflict.
We can have a conflict of morals or different things, and the Torah gives us a framework of what overrules what. So we do have a mitzvah of not causing or allowing animal to suffer. We also have Shabbos. So sometimes there'll be a conflict. So generally, now there's going to be exceptions both ways, right? Because not the chapter won't go into every detail, but I'll give a generally something that is doraisa, in other words, it's Torah prohibition. It's actually one of the malachas, one of the 39 things that generally overrules the animal. In other words, we won't break Shabbos. If it's rabbinic, then generally that will overrule, then animal suffering will overrule the rabbinic prohibition, and generally we'll do it on Shabbos. So let's give a simple example. Let's not deal with the tchum now. Let's just give a simple example. An animal must go to the vet, right? Got hit by a car, God forbid. Now, some animals are muksa on Shabbos, right? In other words, they don't need you to keep them alive normally. They're okay, right? So let's give an example. A healthy cow in a field. Or let's say sheep. It's a little bit hard to pick up a cow, right? So let's say sheep, right? It's in the pasture. There's grass there. There's a whole thing of water. It doesn't need you to take care of it on Shabbos. So therefore it's muksa. You don't touch it on Shabbos. This would be different, let's say, to a let's say I don't know, a brand new
A cat or a
chick.
dog, or
Yeah.
a cat or a dog,
Fresh.
you could
Well, a
get.
dog also possibly, because maybe he's put its food in front of it and it could eat. It depends. Maybe it needs to go for a walk to take care of its needs. A dog could be borderline. It depends. Let's say, an animal has just been born and whatever it is, and it needs you to actually take care of it, then it's a separate issue. But let's say this sheep, and now something happened to the sheep. So the issue is muksa. So muksa is rabbinic. It's to protect us from doing an actual malacha. But here we have a situation of Chaim. So it's just a matter of touching it, moving it, right? So pick it up, you can move it. It's not that's not the issue. But let's say now it means putting it in a car and driving on Shabbos, or something else. Now, then we can't do it personally. Of course, asking a non-Jew is also rabbinic. So here we could ask the non-Jew maybe to call someone. Different things. So every case is going to be slightly different. So we won't start trying to think.
Not to ignore the situation, not to just say, "Oh, I can't do anything." In other words, that's not the right thing to do. Even if an animal is in distress, or a person, or anything living, it just seems to me it's a bigger mitzvah to help that creature or that person.
Again, it depends on the circumstances, and I'm not trying to be heartless, God forbid, but a human life is considered totally different to an animal life in halacha. So there will be times where things will be overruled to protect or save or extend a human life, which that will not be the case by an animal life. But obviously, there will be cases where we'll do something for the animal that you wouldn't do for inanimate property. Right? Because it's not the issue. Here's not the issue of protecting your property. Here the issue is the suffering of the animal. And we have such a mitzvah, but that mitzvah does not have the same strength as saving a human. It has strength and it will overrule certain things, but it will not overrule to the extent that saving a human life does. Right. So back to what we're saying, the animal or the possession that I own. So I've got it when Shabbos begins. When Shabbos begins, it acquires my Shabbos residence, and therefore it can only go where I can go. And if I lend it to someone on Shabbos, after Shabbos has begun, or rent it to them, or ask them to watch it, to guard it, it's all irrelevant, since they took possession of it after Shabbos. It already has acquired my Shabbos residence. Right. Now, Vafila Hugoy, this is even if the person I've given it to is not Jewish. Now, again, not talking about the case where it needs to go to the vet in an emergency. Talking about normal situation. So let's say I organized a non-Jew to walk my dog on Shabbos. And I'm not saying you necessarily have to do that. I'm just giving an example that the person did. I actually don't have a dog, so it's a theoretical case, but let's pretend I did. And I got a non-Jew to walk it on Shabbos. Now, even though he's not Jewish, but he does not have the issue of Techum. He can go as far as he wants on Shabbos. Shabbos doesn't apply to him, right? A non-Jew is
The
not
animal
allowed to keep
can't-
Shabbos.
The animal can't go,
Oh,
right?
that's right. But since it's my animal and it acquired my tichum and Shabbos began, this is even if I give it to a non-Jew, then he can't. Now, if I gave it to someone before Shabbos, even a non-Jew, then the animal acquires that person's Shabbos residence. So my friend, back to the original case with the cup, and I lent it to him, he lives 1,000 amos away. But I lent it to him Friday afternoon. When Shabbos began, it was at his house, under his jurisdiction, because I lent it to him. So now when Shabbos begins, it acquires his tichum. And if I, instead of asking this non-Jew to walk my dog on Shabbos morning, come pick it up from my house, instead, I dropped it over to his house before Shabbos, and I said, can you take care of the dog for Shabbos? It acquires his tichum. So, v'loy oid, and not only that, right? Whenever I read the not only that, I always feel like saying, if you call now, you get a free set of steak knives, right? But not only that, but unlike a Jewish person, so let's first talk about a Jewish person, then we'll come back see how a non-Jewish person is different with this. Now, the period of twilight, right, between sunset and nightfall, we're strict on both ends of Shabbos, because at some moment in that twilight period, on Friday it becomes Shabbos, and some moment in that twilight, that between sunset and nightfall on Saturday evening, it becomes after Shabbos. But it's impossible to identify that exact moment. So on Friday, we make the entire twilight period Shabbos already. And on Shabbos afternoon, Shabbos evening, we make the entire twilight period also Shabbos. And that's why Shabbos goes for approximately 25 hours, not 24 hours. If we would be able to identify the exact moment, then it would be closer to 24 hours. But we can't, so we go strict on both ends. That's how it works for a Jew. So in other words, if I lend this to a Jew, it's where was it when the sun set, the beginning of twilight. So did I give it to him before twilight, or was it? So I gave it to him in the middle of the twilight period. It already acquired my tichum. But if I give it to a non-Jew during twilight, it acquires his Shabbos residence during the twilight period, because Shabbos doesn't really apply to him, so we don't go strict both ways. We actually go lenient both ways as far as the non-Jew is concerned. Okay, so that's possessions. Any questions on possessions before we go further? Yes, Ezra.
So when the non-Jew acquires it, he can actually take the animal 5,000 amot if that's what he wants.
No, he can still only go 2,000 amos, but from his house, not mine.
The non-Jew.
Yeah. He can only take, because it's my animal. His animal, he can take as far as he likes. So if by acquiring it means he bought it, then yes. But acquiring means he borrowed it, but it's mine. So since it's mine, there's still a concept that my animals have to rest on Shabbos. So I can only go 2,000 amos, but that 2,000 amos radius is from his residence and not mine.
And so if you were to do that with the non-Jew, you would have to tell him you can't take it beyond X number of feet from your house.
Yeah, unless he lives in a city, right? So most of us today who live in a large city, and you can walk all day before you get to city limits. But if we're in a rural area, a little country town, then that's correct. Okay. All right. Number 17. So we're going to have a slightly different situation. Now, we know that Shabbos does not apply to a non-Jew. Right? So non-Jews are not allowed to keep Shabbos. Just a side point to this, and we did discuss it once before. If there's someone, a non-Jew, who's trying to convert to Judaism, and at a certain point they start keeping Shabbos, they start keeping all the mitzvahs because they want to practice keeping the mitzvahs. So when they start practicing keeping Shabbos, they have to deliberately break Shabbos at least once every Shabbos, because they're not allowed to keep Shabbos while they're not Jewish. Right? So they have to do something to actually break Shabbos. So the concept of tichum, of only taking something 2,000 amos, does not apply to a non-Jew. So a non-Jew, he bought some apples, let's say, and he transported them 10,000 amos on Shabbos, not in a city, in rural. He brought them, actually, he went out to the country, 10,000 amos outside the city limits, and he bought some apples, and he brings them back, and he comes home, and he's my next door neighbor, let's say. And he says, oh, I got one of these, I bought these delicious apples. Would you like one? So he broke Shabbos. He's allowed to. Am I allowed to benefit from that? So it's going to depend. So in a nutshell, and we're going to go into more detail when we learn inside, but in a nutshell, if he did it for himself, then I can benefit. So let's say he just bought a bag of apples, right? You can't buy them individually. He bought a bag because that's how it comes. And it happens to be there's 10 apples in the bag, and he only fancies eating 3, and he offers me one of the apples. So he didn't have me in mind when he bought it. He was buying the bag for himself, but now he wants to share because I'm a nice neighbor. Then that's one situation. But if they sold them individually, and he bought 3 apples for himself, and he says, you know what, I'm going to get another one for my friend next door, and he buys it for a Jew, or, well, now we're talking about transporting. Let's leave the buying side. Even he didn't buy it. It's his storehouse, let's say. But he transports it further than Tchum and Shabbos for a Jew, then the Jew cannot benefit for that on Shabbos. Right? So we're going to have the situation here. Yes, Susan.
So you actually can't get that apple because it's been
So the apple went further than Tchum and Shabbos. So, but it was done by a non-Jew, and non-Jew's allowed to do it.
So suppose he puts it on your table after Shabbos, can you eat it?
Oh, so after Shabbos, we're going to see that we're going to have to wait the amount of time it will take to bring it, so we don't benefit from it.
Oh,
So let's say it takes an hour to bring it.
okay.
So we would wait an hour after Shabbos, because even if we had it after Shabbos, but the second after Shabbos, then we still benefited from him bringing it on Shabbos. So we'll see this as we get inside. But no, it really depends on for whom did he bring it over the Tchum. Okay, so let's look at it. Number 17. A non-Jew brought produce of any sort. He brought it on Shabbos, further than Tchum, but it was not harvested or picked on Shabbos, because that's a separate issue. So he has a farm. He owns his little farm outside of town, and he went out to the farm, and he brought a box of apples, that were picked, his workers picked on Friday, and he brings it on Shabbos. Let's skip the brackets. So we're not worried about the prohibition of harvesting on Shabbos. The only issue is that it traveled the Tchum. Now it depends. If he brought it for himself, or he brought it for another non-Jew, he was going to give it to the next door neighbor, the other side. But they went away, they went to Fiji or Hawaii somewhere. He just realized that they've gone away for a month. But his intention was to bring it for another non-Jew. The Maturim Yisrael miyad afilu b'chil. It's permissible for a Jew immediately even to eat it. You can eat it that second. He gives it to you, say a bracha, start eating the apple, no problems, because he did not bring it for a Jew. He brought it for himself or for another non-Jew. And after it already arrived here, he decided to give it to you. So now you're allowed to eat it because Shabbos was not broken for the sake of a Jew. Ella, however, right? If there's no Erev, you can't carry it for Amos. You know, you brought you this Ella im kain havim l'tuchabais, unless he brings it inside your house, right? Because your house is like your own 4 Amos, your own 6 feet radius. Or your town has an Erev, then you can carry it. Then you can carry the fruit throughout the entire town or wherever the Erev is. Because any place you're allowed to carry on Shabbos is like your 4 Amos. Your 4 Amos radius, your approximately 6 foot radius, whether it's your house or the whole city, if there's an Erev, whatever happens to be. So you might have to be careful about carrying it if there's no Erev in your town and he gives it to you outside his house. But in respect to benefiting from it, eating it, no problems. He brought it for himself or another non-Jew, eat it immediately. However, if he brought it for a Jew, you or any other Jew, he transported it further than the Tchum for the sake of a Jew. Now it's different. Now Asurim Yisrael zeh, this is forbidden to a Jew. L'chol b'nei beisoi and his entire household, ad le'erev k'dei shiyasu, until Shabbos ends, plus the time it would take for the circumstance to happen. So if it's an hour away, an hour after Shabbos, brought it from 3 hours away, 3 hours after Shabbos. So that way there's no benefit if it was done for the sake of a Jew on Shabbos. So what's the Hainu Zman Shayichul Naviyim? That means the time it would take to bring it from wherever it was. Now, even though you can't eat it when it was brought for you on Shabbos, we call Mokim nevertheless, the term Arba Amos, you can move it within your 4 Amos. Right? In other words, I can't eat it yet because it was brought here, but it doesn't mean I have to leave it on the ground for it to get ruined or someone to step on. I can move it to somewhere a little bit more safely, either in my 4 Amos or any other place I'm allowed to carry. For example, an Erev. There's an Erev in the town. He gives me the apple. I can say, thank you very much. I can take the apple home with me if there's an Erev and put it somewhere safe. I just can't eat it or cook with it or benefit from it until the time after Shabbos it would take to bring it. Now, not only can I carry it in a place where, not only can I carry it when I know he brought it, we've got a slightly different case now. The Sophic imavu mechus tchum. If he brought it maybe from outside tchum. In other words, he got it from a some little fellow giving fruit the side of the road or selling, whatever it was. And you ask him, how far away from town was it? He says, I don't know. I was riding my bike. I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 12. I wasn't paying attention. So there's a reasonable possibility it came from outside the Tchum, but maybe it didn't. So even though it's a doubt, Gam came as Surim. It's still forbidden for the Jew to have benefit if we brought it for a Jew. Unless it's highly unlikely that he brought it from outside the Tchum. Right? So if it's highly unlikely that it came from outside the Tchum, even though you don't know for sure, you can presume it didn't. Right? Let's say really outside the Tchum is, I know there's cliffs, most of the area. So probably didn't go there. But if it's possible, then we have to presume it came from outside. Okay. Questions? No, all right. 18. Now, Kaimalon, then we have an accepted rule that the Tchum does not apply higher than 10 tefachim off the ground. In other words, outside the airspace of the ground. So 10 tefachim, we say approximately 40 inches off the ground. So before we get to something practical, we'll just give a, if you could levitate and be able to travel in your levitation higher than 10 tefachim off the ground, so you sat there in your pretzel position meditating and you're able to levitate yourself up 40 inches, 45 inches off the ground, and you could float and travel like that, then Tchum does not apply. Tchum only applies in the airspace of the public domain. So if you're above the airspace, it doesn't apply. Now, most of us cannot levitate. So it doesn't apply under normal circumstances. But as we said, when we finish this chapter, well, at least start, I don't think we'll have time to finish today, but at least start, what happens if you got stuck somewhere traveling on Shabbos? So an example would be, you were in an airplane before, what happened? Unfortunately, it was a delay. They had to circle and circle for hours because something happened. And when Shabbos began, you were in the plane already. So you're outside the airspace. Or if a person's on a boat on Shabbos, because most ships where you are is 10 tefachim above the sea level. It's more than 40 inches above the sea level. Even though part of the boat might be submerged, but you aren't. Or even if you are, means above the ground level, from the ground of the sea bottom, right? So there could be situations where you are above the airspace of an area and Tchum does not apply. So we'll in this chapter, we will have some examples that they give from their times, mainly a boat. And when we finish, we'll speak about some other possibilities. Even sitting in certain cars, not so much a car, but let's say a bus, you could be more than 40 inches above the ground. Right? Most cars, you're not 40, unless you're one of those monster trucks, but other than that, normally you're within 10 tefachim, approximately 40 inches of the ground. So we'll get to that when we finish the chapter. So number 18. We've established that Tchum does not apply outside the airspace, higher than 10 tefachim, approximately 40 inches. And therefore, this is a Shabbos alpha spinner. Someone boarded a ship before Shabbos, and even though they traveled a long distance, 10,000 amos, let's say, the Komokin of Lesh, Shir b'Shabbos, the normal b'Yotza. On Shabbos, they reach a port, and he disembarks. He gets off the ship, Yesh lo sham alpayim amah l'chol tzad. He now has 2,000 amas, a radius in all directions from where he gets off the ship. Right, because he was outside the airspace of the tchum, because he was on the ship till now, and when Shabbos began. And so the first moment he comes into the airspace on Shabbos is when he goes down the gangplank, and he now gets within 40 inches of the ground. And now his tchum starts from that spot. He gets 2,000 amas radius from where he disembarks. Because you can safely assume that the entire time you're on the ship, you are more than 10 tefachim, approximately 40 inches off the ground. Yes, Susan.
But if that ship is his house, that where he's stationed on that ship, and on Shabbos, like it's twilight, he's walking down the gangplank or whatever, and now all of a sudden he's leaving his residence, but he hasn't made the Erev.
So what we're saying is like this. When Shabbos began, so twilight, the entire twilight period, let's even say the entire night, just keep it simple. He was on the ship, and the ship was traveling. And throughout that time he was on the ship, let's say 8 hours from the beginning of Shabbos to when he disembarks. That 8 hours, it traveled 20,000 amas. We don't say that he traveled the tchum because he was outside the airspace of the tchum, because he was 40 inches off the ground. When he disembarks, he comes into the airspace. So he now has 2,000 amas from where he enters the airspace.
And this is actually in the Torah, in the code. Is this actual? It says 40 inches.
Well, it says 10 tefachim.
Oh.
A tefach is
Right.
here. I'm saying it's approximately 40 inches. 10 tefachim is,
And
no, it's probably 38 and a half or 39, something like that.
How did they even realize that we were going to have ships that were way? I mean,
Well, they had ships in Talmudic in biblical times. You know, Noah built a ship.
but that's different. That's way different.
What's different about it?
I'm just. I mean, Noah was commanded by God to. I don't. Well.
So, you know, look, he built a very large ship. Maybe other people didn't build one as large as he built. But at the end of the day, people have had boats for a long time. So, but we see this is the airspace. So therefore, since he was outside the airspace, he does not acquire a residence, Shabbos residence, until he gets onto the dry land. Avo, however, in B'Seicha Shabbos, let's say on Shabbos, he went ashore, and then he got back on the ship again. Since on Shabbos he was on dry land, the Konasham Shivisa, he acquired his Shabbos residence when he was on the dry land. And he got back on the boat, which is no problem because that was only 5 amas away. But if the ship now travels afterwards outside the Tchum, he cannot move anywhere. He only has a 4 amas, approximately 6 foot radius, because he's left his Tchum. He's like anyone else who left his Tchum. Likewise, let's say that the ship reached a place, there's not 10 tefachim above the ground. He went to there was a place, the ship went through, a very, went along a river, let's say, and there was a bit of a dry area in the river. There was a drought. And he was only 9 tefachim off the ground, the ship, or him. It's a raft, let's say not a ship. It's almost touching the ground. On the Sham Shavisa, then he acquires a Shabbos residence, even though he didn't get off. If he's in a doubt, though, he doesn't know, look, it was shallow, but he didn't measure it, then we can go leniently. And Susan, yes.
Okay, you just created a problem for me because you said a raft, okay? And the raft, how can you count how many?
The reason I said a raft is that because, I gave an example of a shallow river. So most big ships, once they're in such shallow water, they're just gonna drop and get stuck.
Okay, that I get that, but the raft.
I just gave the same idea. If he was on a raft, the raft wouldn't go out to sea, but it might go on a river. So if he got on that before Shabbos,
Suppose that's his residence.
well, no, because if it's more than 10 tefachim off the ground, right? So let's say the river is 20 tefachim deep, and he got on it before Shabbos, then he's not in the airspace of the ground. So he did not acquire Shabbos residence.
Okay,
But then if at a certain point, not only, so we said when he gets off, he acquires Shabbos residence. We're saying even if he stayed on, but the water became shallow, and he's now within 10 tefachim of the ground, he also acquires a Shabbos residence.
That's more clear. Thank you.
Okay. So, now we're going to discuss some ideas, or what happens if a person was traveling on Shabbos and they got stuck. Okay, we've only got 3 minutes, so we won't be able to get through it today. We'll continue it next week, but at least we'll start. So let me just a second.
Rabbi,
Yes.
these laws around a ship, how does that compare to the laws around if a person got stuck on an airplane?
So this is one of the things we're going to discuss now. Like I said, I'm actually going to start with cars first and different things. So we probably won't get to an airplane today, but it's that idea. The same. We'll see. It's going to depend if they were circling the city limits when Shabbos came in or not. We'll see what happens, what they have to do. But so the first thing we need to say is that you have to prepare before Shabbos, meaning you need to, even though we're going to say what a person should do if they get stuck, a person needs to try and avoid getting stuck, right? So the first thing to bear in mind is that halach is required to try and avoid getting stuck. So that might mean not traveling certain places on Friday, or it depends if it's summer or winter. If you have a flight that's going to arrive 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and Shabbos comes in 6 o'clock in the evening, then even if you get a delay of an hour or two, you're doing okay. But if the plane arrives at 3 and you're an hour drive from the airport, then any delay is going to wipe you, chas v'shalom. So a person probably shouldn't take that kind of flight or whatever it happens to be on Shabbos. So the first thing to bear in mind is that a person really has to make sure that they avoid these things.
Plan your day. Do a good plan before.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Now, next situation. Let's talk about a person driving. So, life-threatening situation, because that's simple. So, unfortunately, there was a situation they driving on a freeway, some type of expressway, and there's not an exit at the moment, right? There's an accident, you're stuck there. or the traffic is now starting to move again, you're right, you can't get out of your car in the middle of the expressway. Right? So this is a life-threatening situation. So even getting off and walking on the shoulder is a life-threatening situation. You know, a man that used to go to a shul I went to, unfortunately, he got out of his truck there was someone else had an accident, and he got out of the truck to help, and he got hit by a car and passed away on the freeway. Now, even though that is normally a good thing to do, if you can help and someone's injured, you should go help. But you know, if there's going to be danger to one's life, you know, this could, in bad weather at night, could make something more dangerous than if the same situation was in the day. Might be certain places where you get out of the car in daylight, but at night when it's dark, there's poor visibility, bad weather. Now you can't, right? So all of these things.
Rabbi,
Yes,
the thing about an airplane, you're not in control.
true. So before we get to airplane, let's talk about now a car. So let's say, so normally a person, if they get stuck in Shabbos, they should get out of the car, leave the car. But sometimes you can't. You know, and I think I shared the story once before of a friend that he was traveling to the friend's house, and there was a car accident, and it was on a narrow bridge, and there was one lane each way, and you can't turn around. And you know, the 1 hour, and he realizes it's going to be Shabbos soon. So he just pulled over to the side a little bit. He put his wallet and keys in the glove box, and he locked the car, and he walked to the friend's house. And he gets to the friend's house halfway through the Shabbos meal. They thought whatever, it was pre cell phones, right? It was early 90s where everyone had a cell phone. And the friends, I said, "Oh, you made it?" He said, "Yeah, look, after Shabbos, I have to call, cancel my credit cards." He says, "No, I'll take you." You know, he says, "Come on, in that area, it's going to be gone." Anyway, Shabbos finishes. They have a very pleasant Shabbos, and his friend says, "Come, let's drive back to your car." He says, "No way, I've got to cancel everything." So let's just go look. So they go look, and there's his car. And he starts walking up to his car, and a police officer stops him and says, "Sorry, sir, you can't come here. It's a crime scene." He says, "But this is my car." And they say, "What's your name?" Anyway, what had happened is after they cleared the accident, then they see there's his car left there. And the police looked in, they saw the wallet, the keys in the glove box. They thought the driver had suicided, jumped off the cliff, off the bridge. And they were, you know, dragging the river the whole Shabbos. And he had a police escort, you know, in his vehicle the entire Shabbos, and everything was safe. Now we run out of time. So we'll continue this concept, you know, before we start the next chapter next week. And everyone should have a nice Shabbos without getting stuck anywhere.
Thank you, Rabbi. Stay safe.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good
Thank
Shabbos,
you.
everybody.
Shabbos and-
Good Shabbos, Paul.
Good job.